When they exhumed the bodies in 1991, one forensic examiner walked away from the dig site. He didn't speak for 3 hours. Dr. Sergei Abramov had examined murder victims for 20 years. He'd seen execution sites across the former Soviet Union, mass graves, war crimes, industrial accidents. But the bones of Grand Duchess Maria Romanov stopped him cold. Her ribcage showed 37 impact marks, not from bullets, from bayonet strikes, after she was already shot. The coroner's report, declassified in 2007, describes defensive fractures inconsistent with immediate death. Medical terminology for something simple. She was alive when they started stabbing. All 4 daughters were. This is what the Bolsheviks tried to hide, until now. July 16, 1918. Yekaterinburg, Russia. 4 young women descend a staircase into a basement at 20:15 a.m. Olga, 22. Tatiana, 21. Maria, 19. Anastasia, 17. They wear their traveling clothes, heavy skirts despite the summer heat. Their parents told them to dress for a journey. The Ural Soviet is moving them to a safer location. The White Army approaches. Civil war rages. They need to leave immediately. That was their first mistake, believing they were being rescued. The Romanov daughters became targets the moment their father abdicated the throne in March 1917, not because of anything they did, because of what they represented: imperial bloodline, legitimacy. The old order. Bolshevik doctrine was explicit. Vladimir Lenin's directive to the Ural Soviet, discovered in Soviet archives in 1989, liquidate the entire family, leave no living banner for the white movement. Not just execution, eradication. What happened next was documented by Yakov Yurovsky, the chief executioner. His detailed memoir sat in Soviet archives for 71 years, classified at the highest level. The State Archive of the Russian Federation finally released it in 1989. I'm going to tell you what it says. The basement room at Ipatiev House measured 21 feet by 18 feet. No windows, 1 door. Walls covered in striped wallpaper that prisoners said reminded them of a cage. Yurovsky ordered the family to arrange themselves for a photograph. The official story would be that they were being moved, documentation required. He positioned the Tsar and Tsarina on chairs, the daughters standing behind them, their servants beside them. 11 people total in that sealed room. Then 11 armed men entered. Yurovsky later wrote, I announced to them that in view of the fact that their relatives continued their offensive against Soviet Russia, the Presidium of the Ural Regional Soviet had sentenced them to be shot. Nicholas Romanov stood. He managed to say, what? The first volley lasted 7 seconds. 27 shots in 7 seconds into a confined concrete space. The ricochet alone should have killed everyone instantly. It didn't. Dr. Teen. Ludmila Koryakova, forensic archaeologist at Ural Federal University, examined the basement walls in 1998. She found bullet impacts at 7 different angles, embedded fragments from multiple calibers, and something else. Scrape marks, at knee height, all along the eastern wall, fingernails, trying to claw through plaster. Let me read you what Yurovsky wrote, word for word. The room filled with smoke. When it cleared, we saw that several members of the family were still alive, the daughters especially. They sat against the wall, moaning. We fired again, point blank. The bullets would not penetrate. He doesn't explain why. Not yet. But Pyotr Ermakov, one of the executioners, kept a separate diary. It remained in his family's possession until 2008, when his granddaughter sold it to the State Museum of Political History. Ermakov wrote, I aimed at the dark-haired one, Maria. She looked at me. I fired. The bullet hit her chest and bounced. Like she was wearing steel. All of us kept shooting. They wouldn't die. The executioners fired over 300 rounds into that basement. The daughters survived the initial massacre because they were wearing armor, not steel. Something the executioners didn't anticipate. Jewels. The Romanov daughters had sewn the imperial jewel collection into their clothing. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, pounds of precious stones distributed in corsets and bodices. Their mother had instructed them months earlier when Bolshevik guards first imprisoned them. A desperate plan. If they ever escaped, they'd have wealth to start over. Instead, the jewels created bullet-resistant vests, gems deflecting rounds, fabric-absorbing impact. The thickness saved their lives. For 9 minutes. When the shooting stopped, Yurovsky walked to each body, checking for signs of life. 4 daughters moved, breathing, bleeding, but conscious. That's when he gave the order. Bayonets. 10. The Bolsheviks brought bayonets because they anticipated resistance during transport. Military-issue steel blades, 15 inches long, designed for trench warfare. What they did to the Romanov daughters wasn't combat, it was butchery. Yurovsky's memoir describes it clinically. We were forced to use bayonets to finish the execution. The daughters' clothing was heavily reinforced. Penetration required significant force. The process took approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Let me tell you about Maria Nikolaevna, 19 years old. Her diaries, preserved in the State Archive, show a young woman who loved painting, who wrote about her favorite dog, Jimmy, who described her sister Anastasia's terrible sense of humor. Her last diary entry, July 14, 1918, 2 days before her death. The weather is warm. I pray we will see the sea again someday. When Ermakov's bayonet first struck her, she screamed. Multiple executioners later reported this. The sound echoed through Ipatiev house. Guards stationed upstairs heard it. Neighbors 3 houses away heard it. One executioner, Mikhail Medvedev, testified during a 1934 internal NKVD investigation. The screaming made several men hesitate. Yurovsky ordered us to continue. He said they were not people. They were symbols of oppression. That's how they justified it. Dehumanization, the cornerstone of systematic violence. The same logic used in every genocide, every massacre, every moment in history when ordinary men commit extraordinary evil. They told themselves the Romanov daughters weren't human. They were obstacles, historical footnotes requiring elimination. So, they stabbed them, again, and again. The forensic evidence tells us exactly what happened. Maria's skeleton shows 37 distinct trauma marks. Olga's shows 42. Tatiana's shows 39. Anastasia's shows 28. Abramov's 2007 forensic report details the wounds, multiple penetrative injuries to thoracic cavity, abdominal region, and facial structure. Several injuries show evidence of defensive positioning. Victim raised arms to protect face and chest. Blades penetrated through hands first. They tried to shield themselves. Anastasia, the youngest, ran to the corner. 3 executioners followed her. Ermakov wrote, "The small one fought." She bit Konstantin's hand. She kicked. We had to hold her down, 17 years old. Her skeleton, when finally identified through DNA analysis in 2008, showed a fractured skull. The impact came from a rifle butt. They beat her unconscious before stabbing her. Why didn't anyone stop it? The guards upstairs later claimed they didn't know what was happening. Implausible. The screaming lasted 15 minutes. The truth is simpler. No one stopped it because stopping it meant death. Pavel Medvedev, guard commander, testified in 1909 after defecting to the White Army. Any man who showed hesitation would be shot as a counter-revolutionary. We all understood this, so we all participated. The system demanded compliance. And here's what makes it worse. This wasn't spontaneous violence, it was planned. Documents recovered from the Ural Soviet headquarters show preparatory meetings, discussions about disposal methods, about how to eliminate evidence, about what to do if firearms proved insufficient. They anticipated that the daughters might survive bullets. They brought bayonets as backup. Let me tell you about Tatiana Nikolaevna, 21 years old, the eldest surviving daughter. Her sisters called her the governess because she took charge when their mother was ill. During their imprisonment, Tatiana organized lessons for Anastasia. She maintained schedules. She tried to preserve normalcy in captivity. She kept a small notebook. Just scraps of paper bound with thread. It was found in the basement debris in 1991. One page, dated July 15, 1918, the night before her death. I hear them talking downstairs. Their voices are different now, harder. Father says we must have faith. I am trying." When the shooting started, Tatiana shielded her younger sister Maria. The forensic evidence shows this. Maria's body was found partially beneath Tatiana's. Tatiana's wounds concentrate on her back. 39 separate bayonet strikes. She died protecting someone she couldn't save. The executioners didn't just kill the Romanov daughters. They prolonged their deaths. Yurovsky later explained why, in a 1920 interview with Bolshevik Party historians, "We needed to ensure complete extermination. No possibility of survival. No possibility of identification. The bourgeoisie would use any survivor as a rallying symbol. So, they made certain. After the bayonets, after the daughters stopped moving, they poured sulfuric acid on the faces to prevent identification. Then they stripped the bodies, discovered the jewels sewn into the clothing, spent 3 hours cutting out gems while the corpses lay on the basement floor. One guard, Alexei Kabanov, defected in 1909 and testified, they found diamonds everywhere, in the corsets, in the hems, even in the buttons, worth millions. They laughed while they cut them out, made jokes. I started vomiting. Yurovsky threatened to shoot me. After extracting the jewels, they loaded the bodies onto a truck. The burial site was 12 miles away, 4 Pond, abandoned mine shaft in the forest, but the truck got stuck in mud twice. The process took all night. When they finally reached the site, Yurovsky realized the bodies were too intact. White army forces might find them, might identify them, might create martyrs, so they burned them, poured gasoline over the corpses, set them on fire, then threw the remains into the mine shaft and detonated grenades to collapse it. Except they ran out of gasoline. 2 bodies remained partially intact. Maria and Alexei, the youngest son. Yurovsky ordered his men to bury them separately, in a smaller grave. Closer to the road, that grave remained hidden for 89 years. The Romanov daughters weren't just 4 victims. They represented a system of violence that consumed Russia. Between 1918 and 1922, Bolshevik forces executed approximately 1.3 million people classified as class enemies: aristocrats, priests, intellectuals, landowners. Anyone connected to the old regime. The Romanov daughters were simply the most famous casualties. But their deaths mattered because of what happened next. Silence. For 70 years, the Soviet Union denied killing the Romanov family. Official statements claimed they were moved to a secure location, that Nicholas was executed, but the family escaped. The Communist Party created an entire mythology. Sightings, false Anastasias, women claiming to be surviving Romanov daughters. The most famous was Anna Anderson. She appeared in Berlin in 1920, claiming to be Anastasia. She spent 60 years fighting for recognition. DNA testing in 1994, after her death, proved she was a Polish factory worker named Franziska Shanskowska. But the Soviet lie worked. It created doubt, confusion, conspiracy theories. The truth stayed buried. Literally. In 1979, 2 amateur historians, Alexander Avdonin and Mikhail Kochkin, discovered the main burial site at 4 Pond. They found bone fragments, skull pieces, remnants of jewelry. They knew what they had discovered, but they couldn't tell anyone. The Soviet Union still existed. Revealing the truth meant arrest, execution, disappearance into the Gulag, so they reburied the remains, marked the location, and waited for 12 years. In 1991, after the Soviet Union collapsed, they returned, this time with government permission, with forensic teams, with archaeologists, toxicologists. Abramov led the excavation. He found 9 skeletons in the main grave, bullet casings, jewelry fragments, and the bones that stopped him cold, Maria's rib cage, showing 37 impact marks. The forensic team spent 6 months analyzing the remains. DNA testing confirmed 5 family members, 3 servants, but 2 bodies were missing: Maria and Alexei. Yurovsky's memoir mentioned a separate grave, but he never recorded the exact location. It took another 16 years to find them. In 2007, 2 amateur archaeologists, Sergei Plotnikov and Ludmila Korjakova, discovered a smaller burial site, 60 feet from the main grave, partially concealed by forest undergrowth. They found 44 bone fragments. DNA testing confirmed the identities: Maria Nikolaevna, Alexei Nikolaevich, the youngest Romanov children, finally recovered. Evgeny Rogayev, the geneticist who led the DNA analysis, told reporters in 2008, "When we confirmed the match, I had to step outside. These weren't just bones. These were children. Someone's daughters, someone's son. And they died in unimaginable pain." The Russian Orthodox Church canonized the Romanov family in 2000 as passion bearers, saints who suffered unjust deaths. But the government debated reburial for 18 years. Political controversies, jurisdictional disputes, arguments about whether they deserved state recognition. Finally, in 2018, 100 years after their deaths, the Russian Investigative Committee officially closed the case. Conclusion: the Romanov family was murdered by Bolshevik forces on July 16 to 17, 1918. All 11 people in the basement died. The investigation found evidence of extreme violence beyond the initial shooting. That's the official statement. It doesn't mention the bayonets. It doesn't mention the screaming. It doesn't mention the 15 minutes of agony before death, because even now, the full truth is too brutal for public record. But archaeologists found something else in the basement of Ipatiev house. During renovations in 2003, workers discovered scratches carved into the concrete foundation, hidden beneath wallpaper and plaster. Cyrillic letters, barely visible, carved with a fingernail or small implement. The inscription reads, "Sia, first, Sia, I believe in God. God, save us." Forensic analysis dates the carving to July 1918. One of the daughters left this message. In the hours or days before her death, a prayer, a plea, a final testimony that someone existed, that someone hoped, that someone was human. When they exhumed Maria's bones in 1991, Dr. Abramov walked away from the dig site because the evidence told a story the history books sanitized. Execution, clean, clinical, necessary violence in revolutionary times. That's how the Bolsheviks framed it. How Soviet historians taught it, how even some modern textbooks describe it. But the bones don't lie. 37 bayonet strikes, defensive fractures, evidence of survival beyond the initial shooting. This is what the Soviet Union tried to hide. 4 young women, ages 17 to 22. Daughters, sisters, girls who painted and wrote in diaries and prayed in basements and hoped they might see the sea again. They died slowly, painfully, while armed men convinced themselves they were destroying symbols instead of murdering children. When any government decides some people aren't people, when any ideology justifies eliminating enemies, when any revolution demands blood to purify the future, this is what happens. Not clean, not quick, not justified by history. Brutal, prolonged, indefensible. Every skeleton we find, every inscription we uncover, every bone fragment we analyze with modern forensic science. They testify. The Romanov daughters weren't executed. They were tortured to death by men who convinced themselves they were building a better world. And their final message remains carved in concrete beneath wallpaper in a basement in Yekaterinburg. Practice, which die, and uia, Shates, which dies, I believe in God. God, save us. This is the story historians tried to bury, but the truth doesn't stay buried forever.